Greetings, chromatic warriors. I was joined by the one and only Vince Venturella over the last weekend. And we've been planning on this painting get-together for a while now. Usually it takes place around now when I travel down to Vince's for VinceyCon, but we did that earlier this year in preparation for Monte San Savino. While Vince and I were at Monte San Savino, we both picked up the same figurine with the intention of coming back and having this art jam. I wanted to share my approach with Vince, and I thought it'd be interesting to capture us talking about some theory and Vince absorbing my approach, and hopefully it makes for some interesting conversations. Let's have a look. Okay, now that everything is base coated, the important part begins.
Okay.
Rendering. And how I approach this stage, I always tell people you want to see the forest through the trees.
Okay.
There are many small details you can get lost in on a miniature. This model has these variations on the surfaces, but I want to break everything into basic geometric shapes, like the Muscle Islands approach, and I want to focus on the specular, conical, spherical highlights, as well as a little bit of that zenithal.
Sure.
But
okay.
I really want to pull some strong face-forward lighting on the boots and the thighs. And just generally rendering the shapes without getting too pulled into the details and the subtle variations.
I'm interested to try to follow you on how you actually approach this step. Not just compositionally, which is, of course, very important here, but also in application. I think you actually have a very different way that you physically, tactically render it, right? What I mean here is paint to palette to miniature, I think is actually very different. In my video I recorded, I took a shot of both of our palettes just so I can track them over time and show how yours will look almost unchanged, but mine will slowly become a mess.
Yeah. I don't know how people do that. It looks like a 3-year-old ate off of their palette. Things are just... people ask me, how do you keep your palette so tidy? As if I made the decision to do that one day. Man, I should start using belts. This is so different now. It's just the way that I think it comes from...
Put your pants on one leg at a time.
I think it comes from tattooing. And you would mix up every little step in the progression in its own individual cup. And I don't know, and then I'll skate a little bit off to the side and do my dilutions you can't even tell there's anything on the palette.
Right.
All that gets soaked up. Oh yeah, I forgot something. I feel like there are rules and there are no rules. You can just do whatever you want. So we will be wet blending mainly to conjure this, and also we have a tonal decision to make. Mm-hmm. We have these base coats laid down, but there are a lot of choices to be made. Is this a desaturated, warm, cold, etc.? Temperature-related questions to be asking ourselves.
How much space do we push up? How much space do you push down? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Setting the volumes.
Yeah, we're establishing that kind of topographical map as well. I don't know the answer to those. We've just been kind of going back and forth as to which color we're going to highlight it up into. We looked around online at some artwork, and we're going with some warmer tones. Things are going in a yellow direction, but we'll have colors to choose. They'll all be listed, of course. Oh, hey, who's that? It's Raven from Gravenly Studio. Joined in with us on Friday night painting along, and I appreciate the moral support, buddy. Day 2.
Yeah, buddy.
Different sweater.
Same vest.
I just changed my clothes to show the passage of time. It's for video only. I don't normally change my clothes, but I decided to go with the sweaters. And you can see it's daytime, and we are now on to the 3rd phase of the project. First color blocking, then wet blending to establish our values. And now, the hard part. The gradual rendering, the many pools of paint have been mixed up. First of all, we painted one leg, and then I had you match that leg.
Yes. Now we're going on to other parts of the same material. But yeah, it was an exercise where I watched you execute the whole thing. And again, I really have to say, it is fascinating to... One, it's fascinating to follow along another painter that closely and, you know, understand and execute on their technique or see how they really do it. Because we all have minor variations, of course.
Yeah.
But you really have a very different technique than I think most people I watch. Like, you're so precise, right? Like, just the amount of paint you're using, the amount of distance your brush is covering with a stroke, that kind of, like, what you're expecting in between going to the paint, something like that. It's just, I think, very different than how, one, I normally paint, I think how probably most people paint. At least if me watching people paint on the internet is anything to go by.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I think it comes from maybe just an illustration background, or I don't know. Yeah.
Do you think it has to do with your tattoo background? Because I imagine you have to work very precisely, very carefully there because, like, you don't get a second pass.
Yeah, a lot of my art outside of that is like black and white,
Sure,
pen and ink work, and so it's a lot about how much white you allow to show through. And
right.
Yeah, I think the illustrative talent really leans in there, or just extreme focus on...
Whereas most of us come from, like, painting a wall first. Like, that was our only experience.
Yeah.
For most people, like, the only thing they painted before a miniature was a wall, and they're like, yeah, let's roll this out, let's go. So it's different size of approach there, is my point.
Yeah, and I use those really, like, delicate amounts and kind of smudge them around to a transparent end, which I'm told is feathering, but...
Yeah, effectively. I've always said you wet blend, but on the, like, you always wet blend, but the other side of your wet blend is just the water in the brush.
Yeah.
Is really what's effectively
Yeah,
happening
right?
at the end.
But yeah, we're just...
I don't know if any of this will make it in, but it's an interesting discussion. But yeah, so
It's
now
going
we're doing
in.
the rest. Yeah.
It's going in. It'll be all chopped and screwed.
Staying in.
Yeah, dude, we can add in kind of effects. But yeah, just kind of setting the braces. Like, this is how hard the light is, you know, the distance, how much mid-tone is being covered and all that. Just doing the one leg and now applying it to the rest of the area covered by that tone and beyond every step after that. But yeah, I just want to stop and capture these moments, see how it all comes together.
I'm excited. We're making good progress.
All right, let's sharpen the blade. Check-in time. It's dark out.
Yeah.
Sweater's off.
Night is falling.
I've shown my entire sweater collection in this video.
You only have 2?
That's it.
Oh, they're good sweaters, though.
Thanks, man. Yeah. 2, but very strong, you know.
Yeah. That's what's important. It's quality over quantity.
Yeah, so you can see we're going mad from licking paint. I've got a fine hunch ache going on. It's that special position I get into when I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
I can only paint like this, much like eating a taco. How are you feeling?
Great. I'm A plus, 100%. We're keeping the pace. I'm good. I'm so managing to mostly stay up with you, which is difficult, obviously. You're very quick in how you attack things.
It's easy when I'm the one with the plan, too.
Yeah, sure.
Go here. Okay, now follow me here.
Right.
And I get to figure out where I'm climbing to before I tell you how to...
Well, we're about to turn to... we've hit a lot of good primary areas. Like, we've tackled, some of the leathers and the vests. We made some choices, like leaving things like taking filigree and making it just part of the leather, which I think ultimately worked out really well. I think it looks nice.
Yeah. The studio art is nice, but it looks too heavy and armored.
Yeah.
I think
Ours feels much lighter. And I do think, by the way, once her... Like, part of what's setting off your perception of the miniature right now is obviously that the skin is very porcelain. It is just that flat base tone color. But I think, once we eventually go there, I think we want to tackle some reds, very minimal part of the overall construction. And I think that, like, getting that poppy red, kind of understanding what the maximum value of that's going to be in the piece is going to be really useful. Understanding the high end of that, how it works.
That phrase has come up a lot. Maximums.
Yeah.
And like portion control and setting a maximum and deciding exactly where that goes. Because we were talking about the setup of the zenithal as well as cylindrical highlighting.
Yep.
And really getting the maximum of where those two light sources line up.
One of the interesting things about your methodology is that you are very focused on maximizing the value of all. I don't mean in this case. I don't mean value like of light. I just mean like the value actual like what you're extracting compositionally as a viewer. That type of value, right? From every volume of the piece. And so what I mean by that is the way your early steps work. You're laying it down, learning the fig. Then the wet blending that we did, yesterday was really about like hitting the macro volumes, the arm, the leg. We're ignoring small stuff, right? That's trying to extract like what's going on, big levels. And then here we're breaking it down to those really small volumes. Each fold in the shirt, right? Each line in the leather. Making those and slowly working to really make the most of each movement, right? That's happening on the sculpt. And so I think it's a nice paradigm because what it does is it forces you to focus in like a funnel. Yeah? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And like it's easy to sort of think abstractly like that, I think, often with how I paint. Like you're like, okay, I'll eventually get to it, right? But you often don't come back around because you're not forced to each individual little micro volume or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to do a nighttime check-in, see how our brains are working. We also, we lifted weights today.
Yeah.
That was a great time. And we met up with Uncle Adam and had a robot server take us to our table for some Korean barbecue.
That was the only time the robot interacted with us. What a waste. What a waste of a robot.
It was useless.
Yeah. Shame. Robots are cool.
But yeah, always good to see Uncle Adam. And hear about the new games coming out from Snarling Badger. All right. Day 3. The morning has come. It's around noon.
Yeah.
And a healthy pace. Just have a few things left. We're working on the hat and the cape. Now we get to get on our way onto the hair and the face. Lastly, the boots, because those have been a supporting element.
Meaning our hands are holding them for support.
Yeah, with these larger figures, you end up, propping yourself up and having to move through in a specific kind of order, so you're not erasing the work you did. But yeah, as Vince continues to digest my approach, we were having some observations. I believe you called it the drive-by.
The drive-by. Yeah, first of all, my boots look like I already edge highlighted them. I passed it to you and you were like, did you already paint these? Like, not just rubbed paint off the edges?
Scratching those in.
Yeah. But anyways, let's talk about the drive-by. So, one of the things you're very focused on is really like an amount of paint intensity and saturation that I think a lot of people aren't focused on. And you always, like, one of the things in your thing is you do at least 3 passes of everything you touch, which is, like, really hard to actually do. You don't think about it until you're doing, like, some minor step, and then you're like, I've got to do this 2 more times. Like, it'd just be, like, let's say you're trying to go, like, okay, I need to add a little bit of light right here. Okay, well, I've got to add the light 3 times, I've got to add the next thing to smooth it 3 times, and I've got to add the dirty paint water 3 times. That's actually, like, 9 steps because you want to do that little touch, right? But at any rate, that's so. But actually, you're doing way more than that.
Yeah, 3 at minimum.
Right.
That's the rule. Before you decide you're a failure, do at least 3.
That's right. Because actually, what you're doing is obviously you do more than 3 often in the past, depending on what's going on. That's not weird. That's just a lot of back and forth. But then what I noticed you do is the drive-by. So you'll get that section to like where it looks good or you're relatively happy with it. And you'll move on to like another section. So he's working like up here. Let's say he's already finished like the lower part of the cape and he's working on like an upper part of the cape. So he's working up here and then you'll be like, okay, good. And then you'll just go back and touch that again. And like just one more touch. Just let me get a little more paint on there.
Blending too.
Yeah.
Saliva is a like blending agent.
It almost always will be like, okay, I got a little bit left there. Let's not let that little bit of like very thin paint go to waste, right? And you're constantly doing that around the whole surface.
When you finish with your model, your palette should be completely empty of paint. That's how we're discovering I work with my hefty amounts.
Yes.
Vincent Venturella on Blue Sky.
That's right.
But yeah, I would compare it to, I'm always trying to make all these metaphors to describe how to get a nice blend, and what I'm after is tonal purity. Mm-hmm. And I would compare this to one layer of the airbrush always looks good if you've prepped everything right. but it can be deceptive because you lack the level of saturation.
Right.
You go to like return to clean things up and blend on top of that. There's a huge difference. You end up doing more work.
Yeah.
That is what all this drive-by and rule of threes is about.
Yeah.
Making sure you can paint smoothly but not have the right amount of saturation. Of course, more layers, the saturation is what creates the smoothness. That's the grains of sand analogy. But
Yeah, you're also like a lot of crisscrossing paint on top of each other, right?
Yeah.
So like it often ends up that there's very few layers on the miniature that look exactly like any color out of the bottle for you, but they all look like a saturated version of whatever that color is, right? Like there's no, they're all clear, true reads on that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The journey continues. We're back.
Yeah.
Gone are the talky-walky baby words of chappies and panties and scribbly pibblies. Now it's gotten into a very focused conversation, and we are basking in our own successful air. We just got done painting faces.
The one of the best parts of the miniature for sure.
I greatly enjoy faces, and especially with this kind of the shifts and subtlety and things I've been after, focusing on like the face is where it happens, and we both have this similar like freedom in flesh tones.
Yeah.
I greatly enjoy them, and I was saying to you, like, part of it is so now caring about every surface as much as you care about that flesh tone.
It's hard because I really love the face. I really love painting flesh, and you can just like you can spend so much time there, and it's rewarding, right? It pays off. There's a lot of value.
Yeah.
Trying to spread that love around, the back of the leg wrap or something, is not. It's like you're never going to be as excited about the top rear lower thigh as you are about the face or whatever,
You have to treat every surface with that level of importance. You don't have to spend that much time on it, but yeah, it needs that. I wish I loved every material as much as I love flesh tones.
Yeah.
The journey, I like this. Like, I've been sharing my painting approach with you, and it's been more of just kind of like tapping each other like good game. Like, all right,
Sure.
next spot, what do you think? Where are the positions? Like, where I'm going with it and kind of how I'm like treating the targets and all these progressions and everything. It's sped up a little bit around smaller areas as well.
Well, it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how you tackle the hair. This is going to be another one where I'm going to actually watch you, attack it a little bit before I go off on my own. Just because I am interested. I've looked at the hair on a lot of your existing miniatures. I know kind of probably what your strategy is going to be. But I'll be interested to see kind of where you break into the different techniques, where you're using line work, where you're placing sort of, how you're thinking about light on what is obviously a very satin surface. Mm-hmm. So, she obviously has really interesting hair in how it's flowing. Not too over sculpted, which is nice, right? You've got movement, but it's not like they're not trying to capture
every
hairs or something, which is always nonsense. So it does give us a lot of room to work here.
Yeah. I'll treat it as a reflective surface, but just like with the more of a feminine flesh tone, reducing the amount of shadows, be more midi, as if I was painting some lacy cloth or something. And I just wouldn't achieve that same depth of shadow. So that's how we'll be looking at it, but finish off those last two elements of the model, do a lot of kind of re-approaching, refining, go back around. There's also the potential of final white highlights.
Sure.
Or, just spot check.
Making sure all the lights actually in balance with each other across the figure. Yeah.
Safety layers, now the safety highlights.
Sure.
Yeah. So, almost done.
Good progress.
One thing I wanted to mention, but I forgot to, sometimes you don't know where these progressions are going. You don't want to test it out on the model. So a lot of times now I would take the plinth that I had painted up and just wet blend up a 3-color progression, kind of testing the movement of everything. So you may have noticed that little painted area on the side of the plinth. That's what that's all about. It helps to be testing your paints out on a properly prepped surface that matches the material of the model. Nighttime. Here we stand at the end of a long road, wrapping up our miniatures, closing our minds. Minds are closed at this point. It's all unpacked, opened.
I ate the key.
Man, I love getting together with you and performing a concentrated effort.
Yes.
We'll call it that. Just
Yes.
packing, man, it just feels so good packing so much time and having a new gem for my crowded cabinet the end.
It is very full. This was really good. I think that when I go home, there's like some areas of the miniature that I'm not going to lie are really hard for me to resolve, like just with the naked eye. There is some very, very small details. So I'll probably touch it. I use magnifiers for little miniature details, like there's a part in her hand where she's holding the sword that's like her fingies are all wrapped up and around there, and I'm like, what is going on in there? It's like under her. Yeah, it's soft.
Cast is a little rough in there, but
just stuff like that.
Comments aside on the cast.
Sure, but like overall, this was great. I mean, I do feel like what I was talking to you about was not only was it fascinating to come along and obviously mimic your technique, right? Mm-hmm. And that was a very different experience than how I normally think about it and how I normally think about painting. But it wasn't just actually doing the steps. I want to make that clear. Like, the deeper part of this was actually unpacking your thinking, right? Like, how you were approaching that step. Why? The why behind it, and then the how you were thinking about it. Not just, like, the sort of mindless application. This is why I always say, like, just learning the technique isn't enough, right? Understanding being able to unpack the knowledge behind it, because if I just mimicked what you did and then went home and tried to do it again on some different figure, that's worthless, right? Because I'm not doing the exact same steps. I have to understand the conscious processing, the calculations you're making behind it, basically. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as always, when you're teaching somebody else how to do something, it has you asking questions to yourself about your own process,
right?
And describing things, slowing down a little bit, and kind of verbalizing what has become an instinct. So it's always a learning experience to be teaching and sharing. And of course, like, we've been bouncing ideas back and forth. And I remember at one point you were suggesting adding pink into this highlight progression. Yeah. And I was like, that's a great idea, but I don't know that.
Right. Like, we have to work off your brain.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I will remember that for the future. That's a great idea. So yeah, it's always funny having a look at yourself in that way. Am I in frame?
You are.
What do we say at the end of all this, man? I'm very happy to have this model. Like, I am pushing myself to do something new. So it's really cool that, like you were saying before, to like come in there and have someone join me as I'm analyzing this deeper focus on value, I guess.
Yeah. And I think for like probably 30-ish hours plus minus, especially going through the rest of tonight, it'll be more than that for sure. But like, for 30-ish hours, I think we really accomplished quite a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's to resolve a 54 millimeter figure to that level is not something I'd probably normally do within 30 hours. So it was also fascinating because your technique, while in your mind laborious because of the way you're repeating steps, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I just mean like it's a mental hurdle to get over and be like, keep doing it, keep going, one more time, saturate more, reach that level of purity. What it's actually doing is like you're fully resolving things so much that you are just doing little drive-bys and touch-ups as you move. But for the most part, that area is like, you've done it, you've resolved it. It's ready to go. Yeah. So you really are achieving like maximally with each section. You don't realize when you start jumping around the figure, you don't realize how much you keep circling, right? How much time you're actually spending just continuously circling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I've been finding, like, kind of a personal quest is to paint more large-scale models, and it is easier yet it takes more time.
Yeah.
Is that difficult? Is time consumption in itself a difficulty?
It's a mental hurdle for sure.
Yeah. Always a pleasure, man. It's been fascinating.
Brother, I'd be here basically every weekend doing this if the world and the universe allowed. So,
Yeah.
independent wealth, here I come. All I got to do is, I don't know, I don't play the lottery. So I suppose like maybe some imaginary relative I don't know I had. It's like a King Ralph situation.
Support Vince on Patreon so he can buy his own airplane. How about that?
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Once I get my own private jet, boom, I'm right up here all the time.
Speaking it into the universe makes it possible.
I look forward to it.
Believe that. I'm back. I wanted to say goodbye to everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's always, what can I say that hasn't been said within that recording? It's great to have Vince here, and I'm very proud to have this piece that is not only painted well, but it also serves as a memory. Each one of these pieces is somewhat of a journal entry. The more that I've been paint jamming with Vince and other people, I don't know, every miniature is an entry in that story. I can remember where I was and who I was with and what I was trying to learn most of the time. So I hope that this served to inspire you. I know there's some kind of, it's a lot of theory, and theory is not exact. So a lot of conceptual thoughts, if you will. But as always, I'd like to share these things because there is no law in artwork, only suggestions. Our goal is to simply learn and make informed decisions. I'll see you next time. Remain unchained.